This video goal is to show how the price of scientific progress can be not only professional, but also psychological. Some discoveries or personal conflicts were so extreme that even brilliant minds couldn't bear the consequences, emotional, ethical, or mental. John Forbes Nash, an American mathematician and economist, made groundbreaking contributions to game theory, particularly through his concept of the Nash equilibrium, which revolutionized economics and strategic decision-making. Born in 1928, Nash displayed extraordinary mathematical talent early in life, eventually earning his PhD from Princeton University with a dissertation that laid the foundation for his later work. His equilibrium theory, published in the 1950s, demonstrated how individuals or groups, acting in their own self-interest, reach a stable outcome where no one can benefit by unilaterally changing their strategy. This idea became a cornerstone in economics, influencing fields as diverse as political science, evolutionary biology, and artificial intelligence. Despite his brilliance, Nash's life took a tragic turn when he began experiencing severe delusions in his 30s, diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenia. He became convinced that secret government agencies, particularly the CIA, were pursuing him, leading him to interpret hidden messages in newspapers and public broadcasts. His erratic behavior strained his personal and professional relationships, and for years, he wandered the halls of Princeton as a shadow of his former self, scribbling incomprehensible equations on blackboards. Remarkably, Nash experienced a partial recovery in the 1980s, gradually regaining his ability to think rationally and even returning to mathematical research. His resurgence was so profound that in 1994, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for his pioneering work on game theory, a rare instance of someone overcoming such a debilitating mental illness to achieve the highest academic honor. His life story was immortalized in the 2001 film A Beautiful Mind, starring Russell Crowe, which brought his struggles and triumphs to a global audience, though it took some artistic liberties with the details of his illness. An interesting scientific fact about Nash's work is that the Nash equilibrium isn't always the most efficient outcome. It simply describes a state where no player has an incentive to deviate. This has profound implications in real-world scenarios, such as arms races or environmental agreements, where individual rationality can lead to collectively worse results. Another lesser-known aspect of Nash's life was his fascination with advanced mathematics beyond game theory, including Riemannian geometry and cryptography, which some speculate may have been influenced by his delusions. Despite his illness, Nash maintained an unconventional perspective on reality, once claiming that his recovery was not due to medication, but rather a conscious decision to reject his delusions, a controversial stance that sparked debate among psychiatrists. His legacy endures not only in academia, but also as a symbol of resilience, demonstrating that even the most brilliant minds can be vulnerable to mental illness, yet still find a path back to light. Nikola Tesla, the Serbian-American inventor and electrical engineer, was a visionary whose contributions to science and technology were so far ahead of their time that many of his ideas were dismissed as impossible, only to be validated decades later. Born in 1856 in what is now Croatia, Tesla displayed an extraordinary intellect from an early age, with a photographic memory and an ability to visualize complex machinery in perfect detail. His most famous achievement was the development of alternating current, AC, power systems, which revolutionized electricity distribution and defeated Thomas Edison's direct current, DC, in the War of the Currents. AC's ability to transmit electricity over long distances with minimal loss made it the backbone of the modern electrical grid, a system still in use today. Tesla's work on AC motors and polyphase systems earned him recognition as one of the greatest electrical engineers in history, yet his ambitions extended far beyond conventional engineering. Tesla dreamed of a world powered by wireless energy, free from the constraints of wires and fuel. His experiments with high-frequency currents led to the invention of the Tesla coil, a device that could generate massive electrical discharges and is still used in radio technology and entertainment. He envisioned a global wireless communication and power system, exemplified by his Wardenclyffe Tower project, which aimed to transmit electricity through the Earth's atmosphere. Though the project failed due to financial and technological limitations of the era, the principles behind it foreshadowed modern wireless power transfer and even resonant inductive coupling, now used in smartphone charging pads. Tesla's obsession with energy and vibration led him to explore radical ideas, including earthquake machines and directed energy weapons, some of which remain speculative even today. Despite his genius, Tesla's later years were marked by increasing eccentricity and isolation. He developed obsessive-compulsive behaviors, such as an intense aversion to germs and a fixation on the number 3, requiring everything to be divisible by it. He claimed to receive signals from extraterrestrial beings, speculating that they were attempts at interplanetary communication, an idea that, while ridiculed at the time, aligns with modern SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, research. He also formed deep emotional attachments to pigeons, particularly a white female bird he described as the love of his life. As funding for his projects dried up, Tesla became increasingly reclusive, spending his final years in a New York hotel room surrounded by notes and unrealized inventions. He died in obscurity in 1943, just as some of his ideas were being rediscovered and applied in new technologies. One of the most fascinating scientific facts about Tesla is that many of his futuristic concepts have since become reality. His ideas on wireless communication predated radio, though Guglielmo Marconi is often credited. Tesla's patents played a crucial role, and his visions of unmanned aerial vehicles resemble modern drones. Even his concept of a world wireless system bears a striking resemblance to the Internet. Tesla's work on high-voltage experiments also contributed to early X-ray imaging, though Wilhelm Röntgen received the credit. Today, Tesla's legacy lives on not only in the electric car company named after him, but also in the countless technologies that trace their roots back to his relentless imagination. His life serves as a reminder that genius and madness often walk a fine line, and that the world isn't always ready for those who see too far ahead. Barbara McClintock, the pioneering geneticist who uncovered one of the most radical biological concepts of the 20th century, spent much of her career working in quiet isolation, dismissed by peers who couldn't grasp the implications of her discoveries. Born in 1902, McClintock developed an early fascination with science, defying the gender norms of her time to earn a PhD in botany from Cornell University. It was there that she began her groundbreaking work in cytogenetics, studying the structure and behavior of maize chromosomes under the microscope. Her meticulous observations led her to a startling conclusion. Certain genes could move within the genome, jumping from one location to another. She called these mobile elements transposons. But when she presented her findings in 1951, the scientific community met them with skepticism and indifference. The idea that genes were not fixed in place contradicted the prevailing understanding of genetics, and for decades, her work was largely ignored. Undeterred by the lack of recognition, McClintock continued her research in solitude at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, where she meticulously documented the unpredictable patterns of color in maize kernels, tracing them back to these shifting genetic elements. She theorized that transposons played a crucial role in gene regulation and mutation, a concept so ahead of its time that few could comprehend its significance. Frustrated by the resistance to her ideas, she gradually withdrew from publishing her work, focusing instead on the pure pursuit of knowledge. It wasn't until the 1970s and 80s, as molecular biology advanced, that scientists began to confirm her findings. Researchers discovered transposons in bacteria, fruit flies, and eventually humans, proving that these jumping genes were not just a quirk of maize, but a fundamental aspect of genetics across species. In 1983, more than 3 decades after her initial discovery, McClintock was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine, making her the first woman to receive an unshared Nobel in that category. The recognition came as a vindication of her lifelong dedication, though she remained characteristically humble, stating that she simply had to prove it to herself. Beyond transposons, McClintock's work laid the foundation for modern genetic engineering, cancer research, and evolutionary biology. Scientists now know that transposons make up nearly half of the human genome and play roles in everything from immune system diversity to the development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria. A lesser-known aspect of McClintock's brilliance was her intuitive, almost artistic approach to science. She described developing a feeling for the organism, a deep connection with her maize plants that allowed her to perceive patterns invisible to others. She worked alone, often late into the night, relying on her extraordinary patience and observational skills rather than the high-tech tools that later confirmed her theories. Even after winning the Nobel, she remained a solitary figure, more interested in the mysteries of nature than in fame. Her legacy endures not only in the countless applications of transposon research, from CRISPR gene editing to understanding viral infections, but also as a testament to the importance of scientific independence and courage. Barbara McClintock's story is a reminder that truth in science is not always immediately recognized, and that sometimes the most revolutionary ideas must wait for the world to catch up. Kurt Gödel, the Austrian-American logician and mathematician, reshaped the foundations of mathematics with his devastatingly brilliant incompleteness theorems, only to succumb to the very paranoia his work might have predicted. Born in 1906 in Brno, then part of Austria-Hungary, Gödel displayed an early aptitude for precision, mastering university-level mathematics while still in high school. His meteoric rise in academic circles culminated in 1931 when, at just 25 years old, he published his incompleteness theorems, twin results that demolished centuries of mathematical certainty. The first theorem proved that in any consistent formal system complex enough to describe basic arithmetic, there exist true mathematical statements that cannot be proven within that system. The second showed that no such system could prove its own consistency. These revelations shattered Hilbert's dream of a complete, provably consistent mathematical universe, introducing an unavoidable incompleteness at the heart of logic itself. Gödel's theorems didn't merely challenge mathematical orthodoxy, they redefined the boundaries of human knowledge. His work influenced fields ranging from computer science, laying groundwork for computational limits, to philosophy, challenging mechanistic views of the mind. Yet the man who could see further into the logical abyss than anyone else became increasingly trapped in his own mental labyrinth. As World War II engulfed Europe, Gödel fled to Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, where his friendship with Albert Einstein provided rare intellectual companionship. But his mental state deteriorated into severe paranoia. He became convinced of conspiracies against him, feared poisoning, and would only eat food prepared by his wife Adele. When she was hospitalized in 1977, Gödel, now refusing all nourishment, literally starved himself to death, a tragic end for the thinker, who had revealed the limits of formal systems, but couldn't overcome the fragility of his own mind. The philosophical implications of Gödel's work continue to reverberate. His theorems suggest that mathematics isn't merely a human invention, as it contains truths we cannot deliberately construct, nor a perfect discovery, as it contains unprovable truths. Interestingly, Gödel himself believed in mathematical Platonism, that numbers and theorems exist in an abstract reality we merely uncover. This worldview may have fueled his later eccentric attempts to logically prove the existence of God using modal logic. Among his unpublished papers were calculations suggesting time travel was theoretically possible, according to Einstein's equations, a fitting obsession for a man whose work transcended conventional limits. Modern applications of Gödel's ideas appear in unexpected places. Computer scientists use incompleteness to understand algorithmic limits. Physicists debate whether Gödelian constraints apply to theories of everything, and AI researchers grapple with whether machines can overcome the very formal limitations Gödel exposed. Yet perhaps the most haunting parallel lies in Gödel's life itself. His mind, capable of piercing through the veil of mathematical certainty, couldn't escape its own self-referential traps of suspicion and delusion. In the end, the man who proved that no system can fully understand itself became a victim of that very principle, leaving behind a legacy that continues to challenge our understanding of truth, proof, and the very nature of human thought. Isaac Newton, the towering intellect who laid the foundations of classical physics, spent his final decades chasing alchemical secrets and decoding biblical prophecies, a startling contrast to his earlier scientific rigor. Born prematurely on Christmas Day 1643, Newton survived a lonely childhood to revolutionize science by his mid-20s. During his annus mirabilis in 1666, while Cambridge was closed due to plague, he developed calculus, theorized universal gravitation, and discovered that white light contained all colors, breakthroughs that would wait years for publication due to Newton's secretive nature. His Principia Mathematica in 1687 formulated the three laws of motion and law of universal gravitation, creating the first unified system of celestial and terrestrial mechanics. Yet this same mind that rationally decoded the cosmos later filled notebooks with over 1 million words on alchemy, attempting to produce the philosopher's stone and believing he possessed God-given insight into ancient mysteries. Newton's mental instability manifested in several breakdowns. In 1693, after years of obsessive work and sleep deprivation, he suffered a psychotic episode, sending wild accusations to friends like philosopher John Locke. He withdrew into isolation, combining scientific genius with deepening paranoia. As warden of the Royal Mint, he personally pursued counterfeiters with fanatical zeal, at times going undercover in taverns. His unpublished theological writings reveal he rejected the Holy Trinity, a dangerous heresy at the time, and calculated the apocalypse would occur no earlier than 2060 based on cryptic measurements of Solomon's temple. Ironically, the man who established the clockwork universe of mechanistic physics believed comets were divine messengers and devoted more time to alchemy than to optics or calculus. Modern analysis suggests Newton's alchemical pursuits weren't entirely unscientific. His experiments with mercury and antimony mirrored later chemistry, though his search for transmutation was misguided. Recent studies show some of his sealed alchemical manuscripts contain mercury levels 15 times above safe limits, possibly contributing to his erratic behavior. Newton's greatest flaw may have been his inability to separate empirical science from mystical revelation. He saw no contradiction between his gravitational equations and belief that ancient prophets understood these truths through divine inspiration. When Edmund Halley questioned his obsession with alchemy, Newton retorted, "Sir, I have studied it, you have not." The legacy of Newton's divided mind persists in modern science. His particle theory of light anticipated quantum physics, while his gravitational laws enabled spaceflight. Yet his insistence on absolute space and time would later be overturned by Einstein, an irony given Newton's own rejection of previous paradigms. X-ray studies of his hair show extremely high mercury content, explaining his insomnia and paranoia. Today, historians recognize that Newton's alchemical and theological quests, though unscientific by modern standards, were inseparable from his scientific process. Both sprang from his relentless drive to uncover nature's hidden unity. The man who told Hooke, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants," spent his final years convinced he alone could decipher God's cosmic cipher. A tragic reminder that even the brightest minds can become prisoners of their own brilliance. Henry Cavendish, the reclusive genius who weighed the earth, lived as a ghost in his own laboratory. A man so terrified of human interaction that he communicated with his housekeeper through notes and built a separate staircase to avoid his servants. Born into British aristocracy in 1731, Cavendish possessed one of the finest scientific minds of the Enlightenment. Yet his pathological shyness rendered him nearly invisible to contemporaries. His experiments with inflammable air, which he isolated and later became known as hydrogen, predated Lavoisier's work by decades. Using ingenious apparatuses of his own design, he determined the precise composition of Earth's atmosphere: 79% phlogisticated air, nitrogen, and 21% dephlogisticated air, oxygen, with an error margin under 1%. Most remarkably, in 1798, he calculated Earth's density using a torsion balance experiment, so precise it yielded the gravitational constant, g, and Earth's mass within 1% of modern values. A feat called weighing the world that wouldn't be improved for a century. Cavendish's social peculiarities were legendary. He spoke in squeaky, hesitant tones, fled from visitors, especially women, and required his female staff to remain invisible, communicating only through written orders. Modern psychologists suggest he displayed classic autism spectrum traits: obsessive focus on measurement, discomfort with eye contact, and encyclopedic memory for numerical data. His home became a private research facility where he conducted thousands of experiments in electricity, thermodynamics, and chemistry, most documented in coded notebooks discovered posthumously. When Joseph Priestley announced his discovery of dephlogisticated air oxygen in 1774, Cavendish had already produced and studied it years earlier but never published. Similarly, his formulation of Coulomb's law of electrostatic forces, 1781, and Ohm's law of electrical resistance, pre-1781, only became known after others rediscovered them decades later. The tragedy of Cavendish lies in how much advanced knowledge died with him. His unpublished papers revealed he'd anticipated the concept of electric potential, later developed by Volta, understood heat as molecular motion, preceding Joule, and even calculated the freezing point of mercury with astonishing precision. The Cavendish Laboratory at Cambridge, established with his family funds in 1871, became a physics powerhouse. Ironic, given that the man himself might have hyperventilated at the thought of so many researchers working together. His most famous avoidance tactic, the Cavendish experiment for measuring G, involved observing the gravitational attraction between lead spheres using a torsion balance so sensitive it detected the faint force, while Cavendish himself observed from another room through a telescope to avoid disturbing the blank apparatus. Modern analysis shows Cavendish's hydrogen experiments were dangerously ahead of their time. He nearly discovered the composition of water years before Watt or Lavoisier. but hesitated to interpret his own results. His electrical research, conducted with homemade Leyden jars and precise measuring devices, contained the seeds of field theory later developed by Faraday and Maxwell. Recent digitization of his 100-page laboratory notebook reveals meticulous records of 500 Yaon experiments, many replicable today with modern equipment. The Henry Cavendish who emerges is not merely an eccentric, but a methodological revolutionary, the first true experimental physicist, who valued measurement over speculation and whose social isolation may have ironically purified his science from the biases of his era. His life poses an unanswerable question: how much faster might science have progressed had this terrified genius found a way to share his extraordinary mind with the world? William James Sidis remains one of history's most tragic examples of wasted genius, a mind so brilliant it burned out before reaching its potential. Born in 1898 to Russian Jewish immigrant parents, his father a pioneering psychologist, Sidis could read the New York Times by age 18 months, wrote French poetry at 3, and mastered advanced mathematics by 5. Harvard University admitted him at age 9 as their youngest ever student, where he lectured professors on four-dimensional bodies before his 12th birthday. Psychologists estimated his IQ between 200 and 5,300, making him potentially the smartest person who ever lived. Yet this same intellect that could learn a language in a day and invented his own vendor-good constructed language at age 8 would spend his adult years running from his own brilliance, working menial jobs under assumed names and collecting streetcar transfers as a hobby. Sidis's downfall began with his father Boris's relentless conditioning, a brutal educational regimen that included withholding food until young William solved problems. The media frenzy surrounding his childhood achievements, Prodigy headlines, nationwide lecture demands created unbearable pressure. By 17, he suffered a complete breakdown after leading a socialist May Day parade turned violent. Abandoning mathematics, he drifted through law school, dropping out, teaching, fired for incompetence, and eventually clerical work, purposefully choosing jobs beneath his abilities. His 1,920 arrest during a Bolshevik protest cemented his public image as a failed genius. Though he wrote groundbreaking theories on alternate histories and cosmology under pseudonyms, his most famous publication became The Animate and the Inanimate, 1925, proposing controversial ideas about entropy and perpetual motion machines that only recently gained scientific reconsideration in thermodynamics discussions. The tragedy of Sidis lies in what might have been. His childhood work on vector calculus anticipated modern tensor mathematics. His linguistic abilities, fluency in 40 Yayan, languages by adulthood, including invented ones, could have revolutionized computational linguistics had computers existed then. Later in life, he developed a comprehensive unified theory of history cycles, unpublished, that some scholars now recognize as predating chaos theory applications in historiography. Yet the man who could calculate dates 0 years in the past or future in seconds spent his final years writing a 200-page treatise on streetcar transfers and avoiding any intellectual discussion. When journalists tracked him down in 1937, the former child prodigy, now a balding clerk, stated bitterly that all he wanted was the perfect life of an elevator operator. Modern analysis suggests Sidis likely suffered from extreme autism spectrum traits combined with PTSD from childhood exploitation. His case became foundational in gifted education reforms, demonstrating how early pressure can destroy potential. Ironically, his legal battles against media intrusion, including a landmark 1940 court case, helped establish modern privacy rights. When he died of a cerebral hemorrhage at 46 in 1000, 944, penniless in a Boston boarding house, his landlord reportedly found mathematical equations covering the walls. Recent reappraisals note that Sidis's cosmological theories about dark stars, black holes, and alternate universes, once mocked, now seem eerily prescient. His life serves as both cautionary tale and unanswered question, whether his mind was simply too advanced for his era, or whether the weight of extraordinary genius inevitably becomes a curse without the right support. The William James Sidis, who emerges from historical records, isn't a failure but a casualty, a supernova intellect that flared too brightly, then vanished into the darkness of ordinary life. H.P. Lovecraft, the reclusive architect of cosmic horror, crafted a literary universe where the pursuit of knowledge became a dangerous descent into madness, a theme reflecting very real scientific anxieties of his era. Though not a scientist himself, Lovecraft voraciously consumed scientific journals, incorporating cutting-edge concepts from Einstein's relativity to quantum uncertainty into his fiction. His iconic mad scholars, like the Antarctic researcher William Dyer in At the Mountains of Madness, or the quantum physicist Crawford Tillinghast in From Beyond, embodied early 20th century fears about the destabilizing power of discovery. These characters often followed the same trajectory, initial scientific rigor giving way to terror as they uncovered truths too vast for human comprehension, mirroring real psychological breakdowns among pioneers like Nikola Tesla or Kurt Gödel. Lovecraft's fictional Miskatonic University became a dark parody of academic institutions, where ancient tomes like the Necronomicon served as stand-ins for then-controversial texts like Darwin's Origin of Species or Freud's interpretation of dreams, works that had similarly unsettled mainstream worldviews. The irony of Lovecraft's anti-rational mythology is how deeply rooted it was in real science. His famous line, "The most merciful thing in the world," is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents paraphrased actual neurological limitations described by his contemporary William James. When Lovecraft described non-Euclidean geometries in The Call of Cthulhu, 1926, he borrowed from then esoteric mathematical papers the same concepts that would later underpin black hole physics. His Yog-Sothoth, an entity existing simultaneously in all dimensions, bizarrely anticipated modern string theory's higher dimensional brains. Even his infamous cosmic indifference philosophy mirrored the existential dread some scientists felt as quantum mechanics dismantled Newtonian certainty. Lovecraft's personal correspondence reveals he corresponded with amateur astronomers and kept detailed notebooks on chemical experiments. Though his own understanding was often flawed, he clung to discredited theories like luminiferous ether long after Einstein disproved it. The Lovecraftian scientist archetype has since permeated popular culture, from Alien's deranged android Ash to True Detective's nihilistic detectives. Modern researchers note how accurately his fiction captured the psychological toll of paradigm-shifting discoveries, the depressive episodes suffered by pioneers like Boltzmann after his atomic theories were rejected, or Cantor's mental collapse while exploring infinities. Lovecraft's own life mirrored his tragic scholars, a brilliant but impoverished recluse who died unknown at 46, his work only gaining recognition decades later. Today, his vision of forbidden knowledge finds eerie parallels in contemporary ethical dilemmas. AI researchers warning of unaligned superintelligence, virologists debating gain-of-function studies, or physicists cautioning against experiments that might create miniature black holes. The real horror in Lovecraft's fiction wasn't the monsters, but the realization that science could be a door, one that, once opened, might reveal truths we're evolutionarily unequipped to handle. His lasting contribution may be this warning, that the universe's true terror lies not in darkness, but in illumination. Jean-Pierre Changeux stands as one of neuroscience's most paradoxical figures, a rigorous experimentalist who pivoted dramatically toward philosophical speculation, creating a rift with the scientific community that once celebrated him. Born in 1944, Changeux first made his mark with groundbreaking work on neural plasticity and the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, providing key insights into how the brain's wiring adapts through experience. His 1983 book, L'Homme Neuronal, Neuronal Man, became a landmark text, presenting a materialist vision of the mind that aligned with emerging computational neuroscience. Yet just as artificial neural networks began validating his theories, Changeux shocked colleagues by embracing psychoanalytic concepts and philosophical dualism, arguing that purely reductionist models couldn't explain consciousness. This intellectual shift, dubbed scientific heresy by Nobel laureate François Jacob, mirrored the very synaptic flexibility Changeux had once studied, as if his own brain had reconfigured beyond recognition. Changeux's early laboratory work remains foundational. His team's purification of the acetylcholine receptor in 1970 revealed the first complete structure of a neurotransmitter receptor, earning him comparisons to molecular biology pioneers. He later demonstrated how neuronal epigenesis, the environmentally driven formation of neural connections, could account for cognitive development without requiring innate ideas, directly challenging Chomsky linguistics. Ironically, this same emphasis on neural plasticity later fueled his controversial turn toward psychoanalysis. If experience could physically reshape brains, he reasoned, then Freudian concepts like repression might have biological substrates. His 2002 book, The Physiology of Truth, went further, proposing that scientific reasoning itself emerges from Darwinian competition between mental representations, an idea that alienated former collaborators who saw it as untestable speculation. The scientific establishment's backlash was severe. Colleagues at the Collège de France noted that Changeux's later writings referenced Freud as frequently as Hebb, while his involvement in editing The Neural Roots of Consciousness, 2005, drew criticism for including quasi-mystical interpretations of quantum brain dynamics. Yet some of his abandoned hypotheses now appear prescient. His early models of global workspace theory anticipated Bernard Barr's influential consciousness framework, and his insistence on top-down cognitive processes predated modern predictive coding theories. Recent fMRI studies have even lent tentative support to his contested claim that aesthetic appreciation activates the same neural circuits as scientific insight. Changeux's unorthodox later career reflects deeper tensions in neuroscience's identity crisis. As director of the Pasteur Institute's Molecular Neurobiology Unit, he oversaw cutting-edge lab work while simultaneously corresponding with philosophers like Paul Ricoeur about the biology of freedom. This duality reached its peak in his leadership of the French government's Bioethics Committee, where he advocated for neuroenhancement technologies while warning against scientific arrogance. Today, as artificial intelligence begins replicating the very neural plasticity mechanisms Changeux discovered, his most controversial idea, that science and art share common neural origins, gains new relevance. The man who once isolated receptors with precision now argues that receptor biology alone cannot explain Picasso, embodying the central dilemma of 21st century neuroscience: how to reconcile the quantifiable with the ineffable. His trajectory serves as both cautionary tale and provocation, a reminder that even the most rigorous minds may eventually confront phenomena their methods cannot contain. Emil Kraepelin, the father of modern psychiatric classification, spent his career meticulously categorizing mental disorders, only to potentially fall victim to the very conditions he sought to define. Born in 1856 in Germany, Kraepelin revolutionized psychiatry by introducing the foundational distinction between schizophrenia, then termed dementia praecox, and manic depressive illness, now bipolar disorder. His clinical approach, emphasizing careful observation and longitudinal study rather than theoretical speculation, stood in stark contrast to Freud's psychoanalytic methods. Kraepelin's textbook Psychiatry, through its 9 editions, became the bedrock of diagnostic psychiatry, introducing concepts like disease prognosis and the biological basis of mental illness that still underpin today's DSM classifications. Yet as he aged, colleagues noted disturbing changes in the once dispassionate scientist. He grew increasingly withdrawn, obsessed with proving a unified theory of mental degeneration, and exhibited signs of chronic depression, a condition he had spent decades clinically describing in others. Kraepelin's most enduring contribution was his empirical method, tracking hundreds of patients over years to identify symptom patterns and outcomes. This painstaking work revealed that what was then called madness actually comprised distinct disorders with different trajectories. His classification system, though later modified, remains the framework for understanding psychotic disorders. Ironically, while Kraepelin rejected Freud's emphasis on unconscious conflicts, his own later writings took an almost metaphysical turn. He became preoccupied with proving that mental illnesses resulted from a single pathological process of degeneration, a theory that bordered on obsession and alienated many colleagues. Some historians suggest this shift reflected Kraepelin's own psychological decline. His private letters reveal bouts of profound melancholy and fixation on mortality during this period, mirroring the depressive symptoms he had documented so clinically in others. The ethical dimensions of Kraepelin's life resonate deeply today. His early advocacy for humane treatment contrasted with his later support for eugenic policies, a tragic reversal, possibly influenced by his degenerative theory. Modern researchers note that Kraepelin's personal experience with mood disturbances may have actually enhanced his clinical insights. His descriptions of depressive episodes contain nuances absent from purely observational accounts. Recent studies using Kraepelin's original case notes have found remarkable diagnostic consistency when applying modern criteria, validating his observational rigor. Yet his life also serves as a cautionary tale about the psychological toll of studying mental illness. Like a neurologist developing Parkinson's or an oncologist facing cancer, Kraepelin may have become trapped in the very phenomena he sought to objectively analyze. Kraepelin's final years were marked by increasing isolation at his Munich Research Institute, where he continued revising his disease classifications while reportedly struggling with insomnia and hypochondria. The scientist who had once coolly documented emotional blunting and schizophrenia now wrote anguished diary entries about his own emotional exhaustion. Today, as psychiatry grapples with the limitations of categorical diagnoses, Kraepelin's legacy is being reevaluated. His biological approach anticipated modern neuroscience, while his later theoretical struggles foreshadowed current debates about the dimensional nature of mental illness. The haunting parallel between Kraepelin's personal trajectory and his professional subject matter raises profound questions about the relationship between observer and observed in mental health research, and whether complete detachment is ever possible when mapping the troubled landscapes of the mind. His life suggests that the study of mental illness may exact a unique psychological price, blurring the line between healer and patient in ways that physical medicine rarely does. These extraordinary minds, brilliant explorers charting the furthest frontiers of knowledge, reveal a haunting pattern. The very brilliance that propelled their discoveries often became their undoing. From Nash's schizophrenia to Gödel's paranoia, from Cavendish's crippling isolation to Sidis's self-imposed exile, we witness the paradoxical price of genius. Their stories form a mosaic of intellectual triumph, shadowed by psychological fragility, where groundbreaking insights sometimes emerged alongside, or even through, mental unraveling. The thread connecting them isn't mere eccentricity, but rather the existential vulnerability of those who push cognition to its limits. Some collapsed under the weight of their own minds. Others retreated from a world unprepared for their vision, but all left behind revelations that outlasted their suffering. These cases pose an unanswerable question about the relationship between exceptional intelligence and mental fragility, whether profound understanding demands a certain fragility of mind, or whether the act of stretching human thought to its breaking point inevitably strains the thinker as well. Their legacies endure not despite their struggles, but as complex wholes, reminding us that in the realm of genius, light and shadow are inseparable companions.